Welcome to the Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Haynes. And if you can't tell, the set is a little bit different, and I don't have my co-host and better half, Savannah. I'll explain that here more in a bit. Just forewarning you, it's extra late tonight. Usually we start doing these podcasts around 8 o'clock. Right now, I'm not even getting started till 10, and I'll explain why now. And if I feel like I'm coming out the gates a little hot, you'll understand. So Savannah and I were going to record this podcast together, but we are in a stage with our 3-month-old. For the sake of transparency, because we're documenting this journey just to show what it's like and the realities of starting a business and running 2 separate businesses while having 4 kids, one of which is a newborn, and a very needy, colicky one at that. How colicky, you ask? Well, he, at this stage, does not want to be... we can't put him down, ever. Even if we need to go to the bathroom, he's going to scream immediately. So you can't put him down. And if you're holding him, you can't sit down. So you have to bounce all the time. So you're not able to sit down if you're holding him. And then there's a certain point throughout the day that he is just ready to go to sleep. And when he's ready to go to sleep, he is going to let you know by crying and screaming until you go off into a quiet room and you put him down away from the other kids and any other noise with white noise on in a dark room. And we just play that game all day. Pass the baby back and forth between Savannah and I when we can. If I'm working, she's like having to keep the kids preoccupied and set up with certain things, snacks and food and a show or something so that she can go put the baby down, try to roll away, usually unsuccessfully. So again, coming out the gates a little hot because it's late. So just forgive me if we're both a little frustrated at just the situation. It is what it is. And I guess this makes for decent content considering we're talking about running businesses while being parents and the reality of it. And hey, this is the reality. And wanted to reinforce again that we've talked about before. We do not have easy babies. We have wonderful children, but we do not have easy babies. And again, for those who think, oh, there's no way I can have 4 kids or I have kids and I can't start a business, you can. We don't have magical babies. We don't have easy babies. We've said that before, and it's true. And it's just an example of this as well. We have wonderful children. And around the mark of, really around 4 is when things start to get easier, but like the first few years are super tough with infancy, and then either year 2 or year 3, depending on the boy, causes it to be extremely hard. And so we have a 2-year-old right now and an infant. And so it is, to say the least, a really difficult season between them both. We are very happy, very blessed, but it is just an exhausting season when you're trying to grow companies, intentionally raise humans, intentionally, holistically live a more connected life. For those who understand that, we'll get that. And yeah, just to live intentional lives, virtuous lives, lives of meaning. And we are so happy and so blessed with what we have, but it is just a very hard season. So if you can tell on my face, or if you can see I'm frustrated, I am. And again, I just want to reinforce, we don't have easy babies. They're very colicky, very needy. It is a very hard season. And if we can do it, then you can too. And with that, let's get into what I really want to talk about, which is if you make these 2 financial decisions before you start a business, this will help you start a business. Let me rephrase it a little bit differently. If you're trying to start a business and you aren't making these 2 financial decisions now, then you probably will not start a business. Being totally honest. We haven't done everything perfectly. We're going to talk about personal finances today. We have not done everything perfectly. We have not lived and budgeted well and very accurately. We're just more feeling people, even though I'm more type A and Savannah's not. We both hate budgeting, but we do it. When we are doing well for ourselves and I was working in sales, making good money, then, we would just kind of have general buckets and just keep an eye on things and have more of ratios, live off of ratios. When it's a little bit more tight like it is now, where we're throwing everything into our business and hiring and growth, then we're keeping things really lean so that we can make sure that we can keep this thing going and as it keeps going, increase the likelihood that it keeps going no matter what happens, increasing the runway. So if, again, you want to start a business, one of the things that we did do right in all of this was, before we started the business, we didn't go crazy on budgeting, but we kept it lean. Now, I live around the Franklin, Tennessee areas, and Dave Ramsey is huge. And he's a very polarizing figure of either you love him or you hate him. Either way, you have really strong opinions, especially considering he's around this area. And so this one hits a little closer to home just because everybody's thinking about it in the Middle Tennessee area. Everybody's thinking about budgeting. Everybody's thinking about debt because it's where the HQ of Dave Ramsey is. And there's so many employees here that it's on everyone's mind in this kind of area. So budgeting, again, we were focused more on increasing income because we realized that you can only budget so far. You can only cut back so much. And that's not to say to live just however you want and just to live off feeling. What I'm saying is I think you should know how to live within your means, but your primary focus and passion and effort isn't necessarily paying off debt, though that should be part of it. I think your number one focus should be increasing your income, because paying off debt and having expendable income to grow your business and do everything else becomes much easier when you focus on creating income. For me, even though I fell into sales and I didn't necessarily even ever want to touch sales, I couldn't go back to a 9-to-5 job without some kind of variable pay. To some, that sounds scary and terrifying, and you probably would not do that. But for me, we just enjoyed, like, okay, we live on our base. Let's say, like one company I worked for is $75,000 base, and that's what we lived on. And then the variable was another $75,000 for a total of $150,000. If you hit anything above that, great. If you didn't, hey, at least, a little bit extra is better than nothing because we're living on our base. That was kind of always our philosophy, is how we budget, is like live on the base. Anything else that comes in extra in commission, is fine. We'll allocate it as we see fit, but as long as we don't get fired, we're good. And so I love the variable income. And as a business owner, while it is nerve-wracking, I appreciate that side of the business because I recognize, yeah, of course it's a little hard at the beginning, knowing that you have to keep it lean and hire employees, and there's overhead and taxes and everything else you have to worry about. But that's just for a time. The variable income will also, if you just keep at it, will end up being a good thing in the long term. Meaning on the back end, it will be less about the variable income being hurtful than it will be about bringing more in. So again, we focus more on increasing our income because we realized you could only budget so far. However, what we did is we always budgeted more conservative when we were making financial decisions. So while we're talking about personal financial decisions here, I'm not going to tell you how to budget. That's up for you to figure out. And there's plenty of better financial gurus to talk about it than what I could potentially give you, because I'm not the best at it. I'll be totally honest. I'm good at it. I can do it, but there are so many other things I'd rather be doing than handling the finances of my business and or my personal finances. Now, when we made more conservative financial investments, we were always under whatever calculator suggested our budget could allocate, what we could budget for. So that means if I was making $150,000, I think we could afford something like $500,000. And we didn't. We bought a $300,000 house. If we could afford, a $60,000, $70,000 car reasonably, we wouldn't. We got a $40,000 used car with a lifetime warranty. And those are the decisions that we made actively because it was always the agreement between Savannah and I am so blessed that we're on the same page here, is let's keep things lean so that if we ever have to cut back for any particular reason, whether due to a layoff, which happened frequently, or due to starting my own company, that we would not feel the pressure because our expenses were so high. Now, you might be saying, well, you got a HELOC out. So what are you talking about making, a more conservative financial investment? You're right. That is not conservative. And for those of you out there, I do not suggest doing that. I've said that before. Did it work for us? Absolutely. Is it a very risky decision? Yes, it's a very risky decision. But in this situation, it was even conservative in the HELOC taken out because we knew it was covered. How? Well, HELOCs, or the home equity line of credit that you take out, it was for our rental property to buy our second house. And then also it eventually ended up being a loan to myself to start my business. For those who don't know, I made a video about that prior. But why that was a conservative investment is because with a HELOC or home equity line of credit, they don't give you 100% of the equity. Meaning if you buy a house, you make $100,000 on it, they're not going to give you $100,000 of that equity. They will give you something like 70, 80, or sometimes 90%. More than average, usually around 80. I think ours was about 80% loan to value, meaning they'll give us a loan for 80% of that value at max. And so that meant that if we had to fire sell for any particular reason, we could sell the asset. We were covered, and especially considering that we bought at just a lucky time where the asset was appreciating like crazy, where we were making $100,000 in our first year, the asset was well covered within us taking the HELOC out almost immediately. Like if for any reason we regretted the HELOC, we could sell the house like the next month, cover taxes, pay off the HELOC, and probably still have some left over. Luck and timing had to do with that, yes. But we made that decision because we knew at the end of the day that we could cover the HELOC and the payments. We had 10 years to pay it back. And could we get a positive return to sell the house within 10 years? If things happen and turn for the worst, yes, because we knew that we were already in the money by the time that we took out that HELOC. We already knew that we had enough of appreciating asset to cover the taxes and everything else. If we needed to liquidate, cover the debt, pay the taxes, and still, again, make a few 5 figures possibly. Even if we had to fire sell and drop the price and just move the asset quickly. Again, the appreciation and timing, absolute luck. But the amount of risk that was taken on that decision in buying a first home at that price, even though we could afford more, at that time was intentional. And that's what I'm just trying to tell you here. What we did do right. And we could have probably increased our living expenses even more by buying a nicer car, by buying a nicer house. And it would have been, choking us, and we wouldn't have been able to start a business. Because I think right now, if we needed to, we could cut things down to like $6,500, $7,000 a month for a family of 6. I think if we did not make the conservative investments that we did towards buying a house, buying a car, and things of that nature, then I think that we'd be, more creeping up past $10,000 a month just to meet our expenses. And again, that's just having full transparency. I think that was about the number. I think it was about $7,000 a month was our average burn when I had the loan to myself, and I was calculating how long would this last. I think we were able to cut things way back to be able to afford, our minimum expenses being $7,000 a month. So the first one, again, we didn't go crazy on budgeting, but we did intentionally budget and make conservative financial decisions in the case that we would ever lose our income or had to cut our income in starting our own business, which ended up to be true. The second one is find higher paying jobs. So you keep your expenses lean and you find higher paying jobs. This sounds really obvious, but you would not believe most people, they want to find stability and just chill in their job. Saying, all right, this is it. I'm making decent money. I kind of enjoy what I'm doing. But if you have any intentions of starting a business and you have any skill that you can leverage for a better opportunity, then you need to leverage it to the highest bidder until you start your business. That sounds very capitalistic of me. That sounds very money hungry. But you have to understand that the greatest stability that you can have in a job is being paid the most amount for the skill that you have. Because if you can begin to stack away cash into your savings to where whenever you do make the leap, you have 50, 60, 100 grand in the bank because you made smarter financial decisions both in what you spent and what you make, then you are playing with house money at that point. Not only is it going to help you in starting your business with having working capital to support yourself, but you can also oh my goodness, I lost my train of thought. Okay, so not only will this allow you to have enough working capital in the bank so that you can make more leveraged decisions, meaning you can support yourself more, you can have more working capital for whatever investment or thing you decide to do. That's one reason why you want to take on a job to the highest payer and continue to level up your job as frequent as possible. But the second reason is because you should find someone that will give you a chance to level up your skills, your responsibilities, and your pay, preferably at the same time. So you either have two options when you're looking for a different job. Either get a job of the same type with a different company that pays you more, or you look for a job that's one rung up. Let's say you're a frontline salesperson. Maybe you're going for a sales manager this time. Or maybe you're SDR. You're just like a frontline cold caller. Maybe next you're trying to go AE. Then maybe from AE, you're going to go for a manager. And then manager, maybe you'll go to director. And for director, maybe you go to VP. And you might say, Jake, this is completely unreasonable given the economy and given the tech space and all that. Listen, I was able to do this when I was forced to. I was able to go from account executive to manager to director in around 2 years. Why? Because I was forced to. I was laid off 4 times in 2.5 years during the worst layoffs that we've ever seen in tech history. So to say that you can't do it is naive. Just being totally honest. If I was able to do it then you're able to do it now. But here's the key. I didn't just take any opportunity. I knew my worth and I knew how to position myself in my previous experience to be able to go to the next level, to the AE, to the manager. Because I could point back and go, look, I did these skills here. Even though I was an AE, I did manager roles here. And then when I was a manager, I could point back and go, hey, listen, I really think that it would make more sense for me director because X, Y, and Z. And then I worked my way up to director position. And then the same thing. You just look back at your experience like, hey, the title doesn't reflect it, but here's some things that I did of a VP type role. And then you get the VP role with maybe a small company. And then they give you a chance at a bigger company. Like you can see how this works. So if you're not sure of like, how do I level up? I've made a video about this before that goes more in depth into this, but it is very simple. When you have your job, no matter what it is, you should take on additional responsibilities. You should just do more. You should train people. You should help, another coworker in a different department. Maybe you're in sales and you start to help someone in marketing for free. Or maybe you start like, hey, I'll train the new hires. Because guess what? Then you can go to the next opportunity. If you're just a salesperson, you can go, hey, yeah, I'm just a salesperson. I'm just an account executive. But I have 2 years of experience of training new hires. I've trained three 12 classes of new hires over the past year. So, about 36 people. Ask my boss. And it's just taking those little things that you volunteer for that most people are like, I don't want additional responsibility. I just want to cruise in my job and make my paycheck and just do what I need to do and get out at 5 o'clock. But if you just take on a little bit more responsibility, then it allows you to look, if you are forced to or you want to, it allows you to then go for the next rung in the ladder of your career and point back and go, listen, I know that my title doesn't reflect it, but I have the experience around these areas And let me show you how. Let me show you the result. Let me show you how. And that's how I was able to go from AE manager director to VP in 2 years, as I experienced layoffs. And by most people's account, it would seem impossible that if I got laid off, I could go to the next level. But I did, because I had great references. Because even though the layoffs were unfortunate, but they weren't my fault. They weren't due to me failing necessarily. They were due to factors outside of my control. And so I did, one, always volunteer for more than what was in the job title. And two, I documented the hell out of everything. Any numbers, any metrics, more than the CEOs that I worked for, more than my managers. I documented all the numbers that I could gain. If I beat a record, I wrote exactly down the date and what happened. And here's, again, I talk about this in another video. This is very redundant. If you've already seen this, apologies. But another point to this that helps you level up in these conversations is knowing your numbers, because you don't want generic, I help train and develop new sales people. Like, that's so generic. But if you can say, I've helped 48 new hires of the past 2 years go from 0 to 100% comp within their first 2 years or 2 months of onboarding. Okay, now you have my attention. But if you're not documenting that stuff within the job, then you're losing your potential to really sell yourself and for it to be believable. Because to say I helped a ton of new hires on board, no one cares. But if you say I helped X number of new hires on board and hit X, Y, and goal within X timeline, then you have someone's attention and it's much more believable. And I never made up any figures, and I never kept the numbers on my work computer. I always kept the numbers of any record that I beat or any accomplishments that I got at my work. I would write them down in a Google sheet on my personal computer for later. And so that I have a complete work history of all that I've done from the beginning of my career that I can reference and look back on and know, because I can't remember the numbers from 3 companies ago, but I did write them down. And it makes my resume much more believable because it's all corroborated data. It's all facts. None of it's made up. In fact, if they were to try to corroborate this information anyways, the managers there now would probably be like, I don't know, I'm sure it sounds about right. Because they probably weren't even tracking it back then as closely as I was. So this is getting a little tangential. Apologies, but just these are really vital tips for those who are actually looking up to level their careers while they're trying to start a business. It is so vital. It is not hard. I promise you. It isn't easy, but it's not as hard as it seems. And that sounds counterintuitive. It is not easy in execution, meaning most people won't do this. But it is easy in understanding. If you do this, this, and this, it will equate to you finding a better job. And that is, if you just continue to search for jobs, even if you're okay with your job and you're making decent money, you should still be applying for bigger and better opportunities or something that's making more money. If you truly want to start a business, if you are truly, your desire is to be an entrepreneur and to start your own thing, you need to leverage your skills and level up your skill set and level up the amount of cash that you're getting so that you can put it away and have working capital for whenever you need to start your business. And so you should be continually trying to level up your skills. And you're only going to be able to level up your skills if you have really good data backing up your work situation on what you've done historically. And you're only going to be able to back up your data and have relevant data if you just do a little bit more. You just go to the next, you just do a little bit more than the employee next to you. You just raise your hand for the groups that they're putting together on the specific project, or the stuff that people don't want to do. Just raise your hand for it. And then you become the guy. And they might even promote you internally. But if not, then you have a lot of leverage to use from your previous work experience to go to the next level. So again, with that being said, this is not advice for everybody. This is advice for someone who is a parent entrepreneur out there who is wanting to start a business one day. These 2 tips, while we haven't done everything right financially and haven't always made the wisest decisions, we have done a few things really well. We invested early into the stock market that's going to, if we make no other money than what we are now, which is the least amount of money we've ever made in my entire career because of starting a company and keeping things lean and putting it all towards employees and marketing. If I make no more money than what I've already made, I just keep putting a little bit of money into the stock market. I put so much money in the stock market in my early 20s. It's worth 6 figures. It just hit 6 figures recently. And I'll retire somewhere between 5 and 13 million if I do nothing else than what I'm doing right now. So that I make that point just to say, like, when you kind of have that worst case scenario, my companies fail, I take a 9-to-5 job and I still retire with probably 10 million in the bank, 10 to 30 million in the bank, because I would ramp up my 401k contributions like crazy. That's not too bad. And so that's what you have to, that's the whole point of what I'm making in these financial decisions, is really managing your worst case scenario. You are not able to start a company right now. So what can you do? You can manage your worst case. And if your worst case is my companies fail, I take a 9-to-5 job and I still have 10 to 30 million dollars in the bank because of my 401k, that's not bad. That's our worst case scenario. If both of our companies fail, I'll just take either a frontline sales job and just close, make 150, 250,000, or take a VP of sales role and make a cool 250, 450 a year, and just throw the rest of the money into a 401k and retire at like 50 something. That's not bad. And so if you think about these situations like that of managing your worst case situation, then hedging that risk by ensuring that you're making more financially smart decisions, by lowering your expenses as much as you can. Don't go crazy on budgeting necessarily, but just keep your burn low enough that if you made the jump, that you could float yourself along for a while as you start a company. So just know your burn rate, have a budget at the very least, and just keep things minimal. Keep things conservative. Don't go crazy. You can spend like a madman when your company's making good money. And the second, if you stack that upon your conservative financial investments with always going for a higher paying job and leveling up your skill set and going to the next rung in your career and getting paid more and more and more and going to the highest bidder, that's going to prepare you to have more working capital when you can make the jump, have more of a savings, have more money to work with to buy things or inventory or equipment or whatever it might be, or just to support yourself for a longer period of time. And then it's also going to allow you to level up your skill sets so that when you make the jump into entrepreneurship, it is going to be much less jarring because you're like, I've been here. Last story I'll finish with is, as you know, I worked for a company. I was kind of like the co-CEO. That's what the board specifically called me. I'm not tooting my own horn, but they said I was the co-CEO because I really helped them enter the US market as an international company, even though I was the VP of sales. And so that's because I didn't just do the VP of sales role. I was really kind of like heading product and the future of the company. And I was really invested into it. And that's part of the reason why when I had the layoff with this company and the board had this huge dispute with the prior CEO and there's lawsuits flying around and everything, and the company, half the company got let go, and then the company eventually got liquidated. The jump to entrepreneurship was a lot less jarring. It was a lot less jarring because I was able to consistently leverage my opportunities to the next thing, to take on more and more responsibilities, to go from, all right, I'm a kill something and drag it home as an AE. Then I'm going to learn how to manage people as a manager. And then I'm going to learn how to manage managers as a director. And then as a VP, a whole organization, even though it was a startup. So it was relatively small, relatively flat org chart. But still, how do I lead a company as a VP moving forward? And so I was just able to continue level up my skill sets and be able to then look back and go, well, entrepreneurship isn't all that scary to me because I know how to sell, I know how to lead, I know how to lead a company of what this looks like. Like I've been here before. And while it might seem scary to you to going outside your comfort zone and taking on another job, another risk with new employees and new employers, it's so important for you because it allows you to add more tools to your tool belt. And those tools are going to be really important to you later on, whether or not you realize it when you actually make the leap into entrepreneurship. So that's all that I have for tonight. I'm dog tired, and I hope that you can sense our sincerity. Savannah wanted to be here. We're both frustrated at the situation with an infant, but this is the reality. She's not going to be here, I guess, every time, though we will miss her. And so we've been a little bit in the dark because a mentor of mine passed away, so I've been traveling, and we've had a newborn who's been in this mental leap or something where he's just so fussy. And so this is the reality of entrepreneurship, is death and cranky babies, unfortunately. And I'm just kind of in a weird mental space, but I'm grateful. I have a wonderful life. I have an amazing partner and wife and co-founder and family, and I live in the best town in America with amazing people, and I have close friends. So it is a hard season, but I'm grateful. And I'm grateful for you all. I hope that even for the two people that are listening to this right now, that you're getting some value out of this. And I'll just ask that you would submit your questions to us in either the voicemail or on YouTube or Gmail, whatever it might be. Submit your questions, and we'll make content out of it. And I'm really excited because we have some future guests coming up for just the future of the podcast. Here's something that me and Savannah feel really passionate about. Not only is it this documenting our story as double parent entrepreneurs and starting our own companies, but also in highlighting some parent entrepreneurs making the leaps themselves. So we have two entrepreneurs that will be hosting here shortly, talking about their startups and making the full-time to entrepreneurship leap. And we'll follow their story if we find it interesting. In addition to new entrepreneurs making the leap as parents, we will also be looking at some stories of people who have made the leap and have been successful. You know, we're talking about 7, 8, and even 9-figure entrepreneurs that we have lined up. So while this has been primarily our story as we document our path of starting companies while raising children, we are really excited to highlight some of your stories, some of your startups. And so if you're listening and you have an interesting startup and you're making the leap and you're trying to figure out how to go from part-time to full-time, and you are committed to your business, then we love to potentially feature you if we think it's interesting on the podcast, and maybe even follow your journey and help mentor you if we can do so. And then also you'll be seeing some additional legacy builders on how they made the journey for those who are already successful. So I'm really excited about the future of this. Again, I hope that you found some value out of this, which is, again, keep things lean, even when it hurts, even when you can afford more, because I promise your future self, when you make the leap, will thank you, because it's just going to guarantee that you have a longer runway, a longer pathway to figure your business out, as it's really chaotic in the first year or two. Man, you can play free and light if you have 2 years or a year of runway at the very least. That's a really good spot to be in. And you're only going to be able to do that if you keep your burn low, know your finances, and you continue to leverage your opportunities and your skill sets to level up your career and your paycheck for the future of your business and company. This has been Jake Haynes, the Parentrepreneur Podcast. Thanks for watching.